This happened last August, and it's completely changed how I feel about solo camping. When I was a kid, my dad had this end of summer tradition where he'd take me and my brother on a camping trip sometime around mid-August. Nothing elaborate, just a few days in the wilderness to mark the end of summer before school started back up. I'm in my late 20s now with a steady girlfriend, and I've moved on with my life in most ways, but that end of summer camping tradition is something I've tried to keep alive. Sometimes I can convince my dad and brother to join me, but usually it's just me going solo because my girlfriend absolutely hates camping. I don't want to drag her somewhere she'll be miserable for 3 days, so I've gotten used to the solitude. For this particular trip, I'd found what looked like a perfect spot on Google Maps, some random isolated clearing that wasn't a registered campsite or anything official. It was far enough away from any roads or trails that I figured I'd have complete privacy for a few days. I liked the idea of actually being alone out there, not surrounded by RVs and families with screaming kids like at the official sites. I downloaded the map so I'd be able to access it without service, something I always make sure to do. The hike in took maybe 2 hours. I'm in decent shape, but I was carrying all my gear, so I took my time. I hiked until I found a suitable place to pitch my tent. It was pretty much exactly what I had been hoping for. A nice flat area surrounded by thick pine forest with a little clearing that gave me a good view of the sky. That first night was perfect, honestly. Just me, my thoughts, and nobody asking me about work or when I was getting engaged or any of that. I made a small fire, cooked some freeze-dried pasta thing that actually wasn't half bad, and did some stargazing. The next morning, I decided to hike to a nearby river I'd spotted on my map. I figured I'd try to catch a fish for dinner. It would feel more authentic than just eating the packaged food I brought for the whole trip. Plus, it would kill some time, and out there you've got nothing but time. I basically spent the whole day at the river, but I didn't mind. It was nice and peaceful, and even though I'm not much of a fisherman, I got lucky and actually caught a decent-sized brook trout. I threw it in my handheld cooler and started making my way back to camp. I was feeling pretty good about myself. My dad would have been proud. The problem was that I'd completely mistimed the sunset and underestimated how far I'd hiked. What should have been a leisurely walk back to my campsite turned into a trek through the woods after the sun had already gone down. Within maybe 20 minutes, it went from that golden hour light to basically full darkness. I had a headlamp, but the terrain was unfamiliar enough that I was moving pretty slowly. At one point, I noticed a faint light in the distance. It appeared to be swaying back and forth in this rhythmic pattern, like someone was walking with a lantern or a flashlight. At first, I was actually relieved. Maybe there was another camper out there and we could help each other navigate back to wherever we were supposed to be. After all, if you're hiking through overgrown wilderness at that time of night, you've definitely screwed something up or mistimed something, just like I had. As I watched the light, I realized it was getting closer to me, meaning whoever was holding it was walking in my direction. Not wanting to spook them, I decided to announce my presence and yelled out a friendly hello, followed by asking if they were camping too. I kept my tone as friendly and unconfrontational as possible. The light immediately stopped swaying. I watched as it sat perfectly still for several seconds, which struck me as odd. Then, without warning, it shut off completely, which struck me as even odder. Another few seconds passed, and I stared at the now pitch-black spot where the light had just been. And then, out of nowhere, I heard this violent crashing through the underbrush, like someone running full speed through the forest, but not toward or away from me. Off to the left, perpendicular to where I was standing. It was unmistakable. My heart was going pretty good at that point. The whole thing was really, really disturbing. I can't even begin to describe how uncomfortable I was. Everything about it was just so wrong. Why would someone run away like that? Even if I'd startled them, the normal reaction would be to say something back, right? Or at the very least back away slowly, not spring through the woods in the dark. I tried rationalizing it the whole way back to my campsite. The best explanation I could come up with was that I had somehow scared them by calling out. After all, they had no way of knowing that I meant no harm, and encountering a stranger in the middle of nowhere at night could be frightening for anyone. But still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The secluded nature of the area made it unlikely that there would be other campers around, and most people would at least respond when someone called out to them, let alone in a friendly way. I picked up the pace and made it back to my campsite, but I was so unsettled that I didn't even bother making a fire to cook the fish. I just sat in my tent, ate some of my packed food, and tried to read my book before calling it an early night. I'm normally a pretty heavy sleeper, especially when I'm camping and exhausted from hiking all day, so when I woke up randomly in the middle of the night, I knew something was off. I listened to my surroundings for a few minutes, but everything sounded normal. Just the usual forest noises you'd expect. Before trying to go back to sleep, I realized I needed to step outside to relieve myself. I unzipped my tent and started to poke my head out. The moon was pretty bright, enough that I could see the clearing without my headlamp. The moment I got a clear view of my campsite, I froze. There was someone standing there, maybe 15 feet from my tent. I couldn't make out any details, just the silhouette of a person where there absolutely should not have been a person. They were just standing there motionlessly, like they were watching my tent. I'd never been in a situation like that before, and I honestly had no idea what to do. My mind was racing, but my body wouldn't move. Surely, whoever was there had seen or heard me unzip the tent, and they probably also knew that I was not aware they were standing there. I was likely moments away from being attacked. As soon as I started thinking along the lines of life and death, my survival instinct took over, and I was able to snap myself out of my haze. I reached for the switchblade I always kept by the entrance of my tent and called out loudly, asking who was there. The moment I spoke, the figure started sprinting directly toward my tent, catching me completely off guard. No warning, just 0 to full sprint instantly, shrieking in the shrill, unnatural scream that didn't even sound human. They hit me before I could even process what was happening. The two of us started rolling around on the ground, and the guy, definitely a man judging by the voice, began clawing at my face like an animal. Not punching, literally clawing like he was trying to rip me to shreds. I managed to get the switchblade between us and sliced at his hand before dropping it in the struggle. Even though I hadn't gotten off the cleanest strike, cutting his hand was apparently enough, because he immediately started shrieking and got off of me. He went crashing through the woods again, only this time, I could hear him screaming or laughing or making whatever sick noise he was making. I sat there for who knows how long, trying to process what just happened. My face was stinging from the scratches, and my hands were shaking uncontrollably. I could feel blood all over my face, but I wasn't sure if it was mine or his. I considered trying to hike back to my car immediately, but navigating through the woods in pitch black darkness seemed like an even worse idea than staying put. I only really had one option at that point: spend the rest of the night sitting in my tent, switchblade in hand, listening to every little sound and expecting the man to come back at any moment. It was the longest night of my life, but I eventually made it to daylight. The second there was enough light to see, I packed up my gear as quietly as possible and hiked back to my car at a significantly faster pace than I had been going on the way in. As soon as I got to my car, I sped out of there without another thought. I thought about calling the police, but what would I even say? Some guy attacked me in the woods where I was camping illegally? They probably would have just told me that's what I get for camping alone in remote spots, so I didn't. The whole drive home, I kept thinking about how close I'd come to something really bad happening. If I hadn't had that knife, or if the guy hadn't run off when I cut him, things could have ended very differently. But that's not even the craziest part. The thing that still makes my head spin is just the fact that he was even there. Like, he obviously wasn't camping, and he obviously wasn't a normal person. That much was clear from the fact that he tracked me down in pitch black darkness and attacked me. And that scream, it honestly spooks me just thinking about how brutal it was. Definitely human, but twisted in some truly unnatural way. I haven't been solo camping since then, and I'm not sure I ever will again.